Hey folks, Jeremiah here with Trapping Today, and in this episode I am preserving meat. So, there are a lot of different ways you can preserve meat, and the reason I'm doing this is trying to get some trapping bait ready for next year. So I could always find bait at other times of the year, but sometimes, when you have something available right in front of you, it's nice to take advantage of that. So I just slaughtered an animal. I butchered it up yesterday, and as you know, cut meat off the bone, cut the different muscle groups, made your steak, ground beef, and so on. And then every time I had meat scraps, I would toss them in this cardboard box that I have below me here. So I basically have a bunch of meat scraps here. They're a lot of like silver skin and long stringy pieces. And this is all going to be meat for trapping. So it's March right now, and this, if I put it somewhere, it's going to rot, get real nasty unless I freeze it. Don't really have a lot of freezer space right now, so I'm going to preserve this. I'm also probably going to rot some down in jars for some lure making experiments, but that's another deal. So there are several ways to preserve the meat to keep it from rotting, and there are a few different times and ways to preserve it. What I'm doing here is preserving fresh. So I just cut this up yesterday. It's been cold, it's never got warm. So this is fresh preserved. But you can do what we call tainting meat. So you can allow it to, the bacteria to start doing its thing, and the meat will get a little bit of a smell to it. Like when you got some beef in the fridge for a little too long and it starts to get stinky a little bit. Well, sometimes that'll give more of a draw for predators, and oftentimes that is good to have in a bait. But I'm going to have plenty of tainted bait. I want to try some fresh. So I'm going to preserve this fresh. There are a few different ways to preserve it. You can use very simple salt, use sodium benzoate, and methylparaben. Those are kind of the main preservative ingredients in the trapping industry. Salt would be the most common for bait. Methylparaben is something that isn't used very often, except usually in lure making and some baits that are made. The reason for that is it's really expensive. The advantage of methylparaben is it doesn't have any scent associated with it, so you won't get anything smelling any different. If you really need to be picky about how things smell, that works well. Sodium benzoate works very well. It's more expensive than salt. It'll do the trick, but in this case, I'm not grinding the meat. I'm not going to have a good way to mix it all around, so I can use salt in a very large volume and make it economical and also easy to do. Salt will add a flavor to your meat. Some say that's better for predators. This is going to be for marten and fisher bait mainly, and I think the salt won't hurt it a bit. So this is Cargill Top Flow salt. It's basically, this is what you find at a feed store, and it's the granulated salt. It's just like you have salt that comes out of a salt shaker. It's just nice and finely granulated like that. We want it fine because we want it to be able to disperse all through the meat. So what I'm going to do is just take a bunch of this meat, and I've got this set up to where I've got this wide tray. If you have an even wider tray available, it works even better. But I'm just going to put like one single layer on this tray, and then I'm going to pour salt over it. I'm going to sprinkle salt. And you can be pretty generous with the salt. You don't want to underdo it. So I sprinkle the salt around. I kind of just work it around in the meat. Make sure that you have pretty good coverage all the way around each piece of meat. I've tried using formulas like this amount of salt to this amount of meat. It varies so much. So basically, you just have to try something to go with it. So that's what it looks like right after I salted it down. That's kind of a pretty evenly distributed layer of salt. I may put a little bit more on there, and then basically you just put on your next layer of meat. And so we get more of these scraps, put a layer down till we cover most of that surface. And then add another layer of salt. And you continue to do this, layer meat, layer salt, layer meat, layer salt. I prefer ground meat. I prefer to run it through a grinder, but this is because it's all trimmings. There's a lot of silver skin. There's a lot of really like thick, fatty and cartilage stuff, and there's just a lot of stuff that really makes it a pain to run through a grinder. So anyway, you just make all those layers up. You got plenty of salt for the amount of meat that you have. They're probably, as far as weight, probably not quite as much weight in salt as you have meat, but at least half. And what I'm going to do is actually, once I get this nice and layered and covered with plenty of salt, I'm going to put a heavy duty plastic bag inside this 5-gallon pail, and I'm going to put the meat in the plastic bag, and then I'm going to tie up the plastic bag sealed completely, tie it in a knot at the top, and then I'm going to put this cap on the pail. The reason for the bag is to keep the flies from getting in, because sometimes the flies can get in under your pail cover and ruin your entire batch of meat. So I did this last year with a bunch of beaver meat, and it worked very well. The sodium benzoate with the ground meat was just perfect, but this worked pretty well too. And basically I just layered it up, tied it up in a bag, come back 6 months later, just like I left it. So works well. Hope this helps, and we'll catch you next time.